This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not therapy or clinical treatment and does not create a therapist-client relationship. If you are in need of mental health support, please consult a licensed professional. The views expressed by guests are their own and may not reflect those of Fredrick Bush or OBBM. Participation in any discussion does not replace professional medical or psychological advice. Listener discretion is advised for emotionally sensitive topics.
Welcome to On Being Black Man, a blueprint for power and purpose with Fredrick Bush. This is a space for truth, healing, and forward motion for Black men and the people who love them, bringing together real voices from the community, brothers, fathers, thinkers, artists, and everyday people, sharing honest conversations about manhood, mental health, relationships, legacy, and what it means to carry both history and hope. We're not here to fix, we're here to build. From generational trauma to emotional growth, each episode offers reflection, perspective, and a call to reclaim power on our own terms. Whether you're navigating struggle or stepping into the unknown, you're not alone. This is for men. This is about men. This is On Being Black Men.
Hello and welcome to another episode of On Being Black Men. I'm Fredrick Bush and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am the founder of the ICBM workshops, which this podcast is an offshoot of. So today's topic will be almost sort of a dovetail, maybe a precursor to last. We spoke to Jerry Ali the last time, and we were kind of talking about how our lives have developed. But Jerry was he is a insurance professional who deals with estate planning. And toward the end, we talked about, I asked him, well, what do Black men need, what Black families need, and how do we create that generational wealth? And the primary thing was insurance, because insurance, it's not the bugaboo that we think it is, but it is a difficult subject that we talk about, particularly when we're with the living and we don't like to think about ourselves in the hereafter, and wherever place you might be going, or whichever one. So, but that's probably what makes it difficult. We are not immortal, but to have generational wealth sometimes means you will not be here. You'll just be the conduit who passes it on. But my guest today works a lot with the elderly, and she's been here before, Dr. Robin Wiley. We talked more in general about men in general the last time, but because of, for me, the last 6 months of my life have been kind of turned in unexpected ways, with the death of my mother and then my brother. This has given me great thought about my own kind of mortality, being that I'm still relatively young and vibrant. But these are very difficult challenges to talk about as people start to age. And as we'll find out, Black men have a more challenging time of it as they age, for different well, a multitude of different reasons, but we'll talk about that with Dr. Robin. She is she's also a social worker. She got her social work credentials at Virginia State, and she is DSW from Rutgers. That's kind of how I met her. We were in the DSW program. I bailed and she stayed, and she has over 25 years of experience. And the one fantastic thing about her, and I don't think I've ever told her how proud I am of this. When I met her, she was a social worker, but now she is the founder of Infinity Empowerment Services, which has become kind of you know, um, a real powerhouse in healthcare and mental health care. And she's kind of grown this business out of, just being a sole proprietor, a sole practitioner, a sole clinician to this, big, kind of mental health concern, which, I'm sure we can spend hours talking about that. But what her company does is it improves personal growth and health and emotional wellness. She does workshops and she does consulting service. She was just at a workshop this morning. So she also hosts a podcast called Let's Talk with Dr. Robin. So we're really glad that she is here, and hopefully we will get a wonderful talk out of her today. So, Dr. Robin.
Well, hello.
There you is.
Yeah, I'm here. I am here. Excited to be here. I'm always excited. Our conversation's always great. But I'm glad to have been asked back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's always a good thing when they ask you back a second time.
Well, to tell you the truth, a lot of people, they didn't publicly post it or anything, but they kind of in private told me they liked your talk, the talk we had.
Well,
So, it was, I was, nudged in the back to have you back. So,
a little bit of a reinforcement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
the thing about this is that, as I said in the opening, and as we have discussed that, this thing around this resistance to talk about future in the way that we age, Black men, notoriously don't go to doctors. They don't, men in general, they would prefer not to. And in many ways that works in their, that doesn't work in their favor, where, some things you can get ahead of by the time they do go to a doctor. It's so advanced that there's almost no recourse for what they're doing. And I know that you have, this is kind of how I met you. You were working with the elderly, seniors. And my late mother, you was included in your dissertation when you became a big time doctor. And she really enjoyed talking with you, and I think it was kind of an accounting of her life and things like that. She kind of enjoyed that. So, but we want to think about it today in terms of men, since this is a show about men. And how do we kind of open that discussion to Black men about their future, their senior future. We always, we have a very young population. The average age of Black people is around 30s, early 40s. And then we just kind of drop off. And part of that is we don't have a lot of elders, that we do have them, but it seems like people are, passing away younger and without real like a real heads up about where they were. They, as I said, they wait until things are very severe to then take action. So,
Right.
being that you work with a lot of older seniors, what's your take on that?
So it's a lot to unpack there. I mean,
I
I think
I try to make the hour, full of full
you
of
put a lot out there,
yeah.
So, I think one of the things that I think about in my work with older adults and in my work, I've been fortunate to have some older male clients.
Mhm.
Um, and it's been really interesting because the communication is very different. I will say that. And also I think about the older men in my own family, who are older Black men, my dad being one of them, and the communication piece, so uh I think so. Certainly, you're right. It starts when you're younger, like in terms of going to the doctor, following through with things, acknowledging the pain that you got and going and getting that checked out and all that kind of stuff. So, a lot of times, there is a bit of self neglect for whatever reason.
Mm,
Um, that occurs. I had a family member that passed not too long ago that had a condition and had some discomfort and just kind of ignored it. And then, like you said, by the time they got to the doctor, it was like, okay, your options are limited. I've also had friends of mine, male Black men, that I have literally said, hey, just in conversation, when's the last time you went to the doctor? And it's been like years. Like they haven't gone since they went for like a wellness check as a child.
mm.
It's like, but
Wow.
you're like, we're in the same age range. Like, what are you doing?
Mm,
And so it's perplexing because, but the social worker in me, has some understanding because I think one, there's a lot that plays into that. One, I think, as Black folks in general, and I think Black men probably about 10 times more, there's a distrust that is there also.
mm,
We don't have a lot of trust in the medical profession. Even if we work in the medical profession,
mhm,
we
mhm,
still, right. That's historical. Black men in particular have been the victims of, medical fraud, medical abuse, you know what I mean,
mm,
Tuskegee, you know what I'm saying?
mm,
We can just go on and on. And those are things, Henrietta Lacks, we have
mm,
situations that, we carry.
mhm,
And I think for Black men, having to go to a physician, and also there's a fear. And it's interesting because a conversation I had with a good friend of mine, that was his take on it. He said, well, I don't want them to tell me something is wrong. And I said, well, would you rather would you rather not know that something is wrong, and then your options are limited, because that's what happens. The longer we wait, the options are limited.
mhm,
And so at this point, you can actually take an active stance. If you go in and they say, hey, you know what? Your blood pressure is not right, we need to put you on something, or your A1C is
mhm,
you're on the cusp of being diabetic, we're going to
mhm,
put you on, we can help you with that. You've got options, and you could possibly no longer have the issue. But waiting and prolonging the inevitable,
mhm,
especially if you're not feeling well, is just going to make it worse. So it's like an avoidance in a sense.
mhm.
um and that's unfortunate because we need our Black men. um I think another factor here is the level of
We
stress.
need healthy Black men.
Well, yes, we need healthy Black men. We
We
do,
got
'cause
plenty of men, but, if they're not
well, yeah,
healthy and they're not
yeah, you're not healthy, right?
fit,
No. Mm-mm.
then, it's like, you're reversing it. You become the burden, instead of being, now, if you're aging, then you're not so much a burden, you're just aging, and you should be attended to appropriately.
But how you
Um,
age,
exactly. How
how you
you age is,
because
mm,
if you're not taking care of yourself in, like, I would say, I mean, you could say 30s, 40s, but if you're not addressing the things you need to do, especially your 40s, 50s, then when you get into the 60s and 70s,
mm,
those things are going to exacerbate. They're going to be worse, whatever those conditions may be. And a lot of times we're talking about preventative, your prostate check, all that kind of stuff.
mhm, mhm,
Um, And I'll tell you, here's the other part. Who becomes the caregiver
Mm,
for the Black man
yeah.
when he is not addressing things early
Mm.
on? It is
If he's lucky, he has a
if he is
partner.
yes, if he is lucky,
Yeah.
right. And so it becomes his partner,
Mm,
right? That is the caregiver. So now life has, granted, some things are outside of our control, so arthritis, other things. You know what I mean? There are other
mhm,
things that
mhm,
could impede our ability, limit mobility or whatever, that are outside of our control, and things that just happen normally because of aging
mhm,
or some random thing that happens that causes some type of health thing. But I'm really talking about the things that we could be preventative. So now you have this plan with your partner of vacationing and doing different things or whatever. But now, because of illness, because of treatment, whatever, nobody's going anywhere because now we have to
mhm.
tend to the care
Yeah,
and you're home
yeah,
bound, bedridden, et cetera,
yeah,
et cetera.
yeah.
So it's not to make anybody feel guilty, but it is about, this consideration. And I mean, and that's one part of it, right? The health piece, because we are living a lot longer. Well, let me say this. We have the means to live a lot longer.
Yes.
We do. We have the resources and the means, the medical advances, the testing, all that stuff to live a pretty long time. And
Mhm,
in preparation for that, and that's for men and women, but for men in particular, Black men in particular, we need to take that into consideration. So utilizing the resources is important. Also managing, because another piece of this is managing our stress and addressing mental health.
mhm, mhm.
Because I'm sure you remember this about that mind body connection.
Oh, yes, definitely, definitely.
So if you're in pain, if something's off, you know what I mean, even with digestion, all of that can affect you emotionally.
Mhm.
So maintaining that, and Black men are a stressed out group. Black women are too, but Black men are a stressed out group just by the fact that you're a Black man.
Yeah. But, to that nuanced, um, kind of distinction you're making, it's not that women aren't stressed out, they are, but it seems like they also have networks amongst themselves that they can always find in some way, some, uh, um, some partner, companion, friend, sister,
Mhm.
who can assist them and they can talk. It's not all the time, but a great deal of the time. I was looking up this book that I've been reading. This is Your Brain on Food, and she talks. Her name is Nadu, Dr. Nadu, and
Mhm.
she talks a lot about the brain stomach, the gut brain biome, the connection, and how diet can influence our aging, our
Mhm.
cognitive abilities, uh, our weight, our how we can control our weight, and for Black people that becomes a very big deal given the the percentage of people who are diabetics or
Mhm.
who are on dialysis or who are just having very tough times just walking around with on their limbs. And so this gut brain is part of that mind body type of thing where you have to think of the whole of the person, and the whole, and not we're the person has to think of themselves
Yes.
wholly.
Yes.
you
It's
know
not just one thing.
it's
It's
not just
everything is a
one
piece
thing.
of, it's a puzzle. And so well, I would say not so much, maybe like when you think of a machine. Because really,
Mhm,
when you think of a machine,
mhm.
like if one part's not working well, it affects the other parts.
Yes, it will.
And so there's not just one thing that helps us to be healthy.
Mhm.
There are a lot of things,
Yes.
and it has to be kind of individualized. Like, I mean, I think that is you're always reading really good books. So that I wrote that down because I want
Mhm,
to check that one out because that is something we do have to look at,
mhm.
processed foods. I mean, that's a whole
Yeah,
other
yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
And what is marketed as healthy
Yes.
that is not healthy. because it's all processed, it's all manufactured.
Yeah, that's
So
basically all the things she the book could be one chapter. Stop eating processed foods. The end.
yeah, I'm
You
sure,
know,
right.
but
That's it
she
in a nutshell.
does break it down because she's a nutritional psychiatrist. That's what she
Oh,
does.
wow.
So
Wow.
she's not she's not as an MD, she's not against the drugs, but she
Mhm.
realizes that the drugs have a limitation. And if we're not eating certain foods in certain ways and have a diet that is cleaner, if you will, then that over time helps to age us. It helps us get out of equilibrium, which we're trying. Our body is always trying to find,
Mhm.
that equilibrium. But if we put things in its way, we make it more difficult. So the fast foods, the fried foods, she calls an American diet or a Western diet where we probably should have a little bit more of a Mediterranean diet. I'm not going to spoil the book for anybody else, but no, these things it got
Don't
me
give away all
thinking
the
about.
secrets. But it sounds, yeah, it sounds interesting. And I think it reiterates kind of some things that you hear in different platforms. But
Yes.
it's a shame because it's kind of like, society or really what we see in the media works against that. Like, what's inexpensive? When you
Mhm,
think about the cost of things now, the cost of eggs, the cost of fresh vegetables, things like that. We still, even though we know that the science and everything says to promote healthy living, you need to eat this way. However, we live in a country where that is not affordable.
mhm,
That you still have food deserts in certain
mhm,
communities. You have communities without, really good grocery stores or what have you. Or if
mhm.
you go to, Whole Foods, not to, I mean, I love going there. A friend of mine jokes and says it's Whole Foods because you spend your whole paycheck and walk out of there with like one bag. But things are expensive. The
Yeah.
more organic, whatever organic means these days, but the more whole something is, the more expensive it is.
Mhm.
Um,
It's funny. I like to think about that. I used to think about that in that way. But if you think, since I have a lot of old people in my family,
mhm,
they would talk about how they would keep gardens.
mhm,
And on both sides of my family, they're sharecroppers, so they knew how to grow things. And it seems like particularly on my father's father, he was kind of a little bit of a genius when it came to growing things, because he would always be able to have although a sharecropper, he wasn't really participating in the share. He could grow crops for other people. That said, that was the organic thing.
right.
You
That's
went
true
out to
organic.
your garden. It's right. We
Yeah,
were
that's
we
actually
were eating
organic. Yeah.
organically until, the turn of the Industrial Revolution, when
Mhm.
things became, packaged and, convenience, that whole thing. But, my mother, because she was one of the cooks, I think it was, between two or three of my aunts to cook for the family, and she was cooking when she was, 8, 9, 10 years old, for 11 kids plus people who were out in the fields. And she would think nothing of going to grab a chicken, snapping the neck off, and just, that would be dinner for, the evening. And even that wouldn't happen all that often. It's not like every day that happened. That was kind of a special thing. But the thought that, I like to think about it in reverse. We have been kind of groomed that food is cheap, right? But it's only cheap because of the processing. You can process vast amounts of it. So when you have that economy of scale, and now you have food that is not being processed in that way, that looks to be expensive, but that may be the true cost of food. That someone goes out and picks it right away, and brings it. If you look at a farmer's market, that's what they're doing. It's not that their
Right,
food is
right.
expensive; it's that everything else seems so cheap.
Well,
Um,
And the cost, and I guess, and don't get me wrong, like I'm saying in terms of if you think about our average person, right?
Mhm.
Like someone who is on a budget, and you think about the times that we're in now where gas is like almost, I mean, probably close to
Mhm.
like $5 a gallon, whatever, and folks are kind of living paycheck to paycheck or whatever the case may be, and also wanting to eat healthy. And how do they access that food? You know what I mean? So it's
Mhm.
because it's all relative, right? Because the other thing is you're paying the cost in a different way. So if we're eating a lot of processed food,
Mhm.
then there's a cost to that. You may not be paying you're not paying the cost up front, but you're going to pay the cost later,
Mhm.
whether it
But
is
that
how it
cost
affects our
is,
bodies or what have
yes,
you.
exactly. That
You know,
cost, it shows up in your body over time.
right. Right.
So, so you're right.
Which
Is
folks don't think about.
where do you want to spend your money? You can, buy that, $5 head of cabbage and figure out how to make it work,
Mhm.
or you can, go to a fast food place or some other type of chain, and some of the even the chain restaurants are still, you're still having processed food, so you're not doing yourself a favor. um, but I want to kind of get back to kind of what I see as your strength, because you love old people, and as we're aging, and that right where you said, if as men are aging, if they're fortunate enough to have a partner, to have a wife or a companion, what happens to those men who don't have that? Because a lot of men don't have that. They didn't
Right.
commit to a relationship where they, um, have a, someone who is invested in them enough to take care of them when they
Right.
get to this stage in their life. And, let's face it, everyone who's 30, if they're lucky, they're going to be 70. Uh,
Right.
what
Yeah,
what
if they're
what
lucky, yes.
what did you in and here's the thing, do we we're talking about food, but also relationships are, they feed uh people. We also have this kind of particularly with men, this isolation that's going on. So um maybe you can talk to that portion of, uh, as Black men are aging with or without partners, what is it that you've been seeing? Because I know you see uh, you know people in nursing homes and things like that. I know my
Mhm.
when I was visiting my mother in a nursing home, I could count the men who were there. It was
Yeah, it's
overwhelmingly women who were
yes.
in that
Yes.
situation.
Yes. And I mean, so part of that is there still is, some verifiable data that shows that, women still outlive men.
Mhm.
They do. And I think a part of that is kind of what we were talking about earlier, is the idea that because men are not going to the doctor enough. They're not sort of doing the preventative sort of care. And so with women, because some think, oh, well, are women just healthier? Is it genetics, whatever? I don't know that that's necessarily the case. It is more of women are going to the doctor more. So if
Mhm.
there's something, and that's just by like we are constantly poked, prodded, whatever. Okay.
Mhm.
Women are not just going to see a primary care each year. We're going to see a GYN, we're getting a pap smear, we're getting annual exams, blood work is done, our vitamin D is being checked. We're getting all these things. So if there's something going on with a woman, it is somebody somewhere is going to know, and then we're
Mhm.
getting treatment.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
whether we're going in so there's a lot more preventative stuff that
Mhm.
is happening with women versus men are not going to see the doctor. So granted, that's one of the things. And also too, I think for men not having the partner or really being possibly more stubborn in relation to, I can live on my own, I'm
Mhm.
fine, nothing's
Mhm.
wrong with me,
Mhm.
are probably not getting some of the help that they might need. I mean, not saying that everybody needs to go to long-term care.
Mhm.
I don't think that's the case, but men are possibly still living in community, and aging in place. And sometimes men make the decision later to have a partner because they realize there is nobody to help me or to take care of
Mhm.
me,
Mhm.
or to just have the companionship. So men sometimes are waiting maybe a bit longer. I've had some conversations with some older male clients where, one in particular who that was his kind of objective. He was like, I feel like I need to be in a relationship because I need somebody to, be with, and he was basically to take care of him.
Mm.
Not that he needed any care yet, but it was just the idea of not having anybody
Mm.
now became more like in your face because he was aging.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and so, I think there's this piece of men needing to prioritize their health, needing to see the doctors they need to see. And I understand, I do fully understand some of the procedures, the prostate thing. I get it. It's not anything that anybody wants to be talking about, but it is necessary and it saves lives.
It does.
And
So,
yeah,
I know you're talking about the what they call the digit exam.
not the
Um,
digit. Oh, I didn't know. Not
yeah,
the
they
digit.
because
Okay.
they're gonna,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
want to feel the prostate, and they feel their prostate through a certain part of your body so they can feel it.
Yes. Yes.
However, I'm told, and since I went through it, I never had a digit exam. And if that scares men, I don't think it should, because we have all these ways of scanning, and
Hmm.
that, through like a PSA scan,
Hmm.
my because I was actually going to a doctor. I went to, I've had my doctor for a very long time, and he saw something in my PSA that, because he was tracking, year after year, and he said, "Oh, there's like a little bit of a jump." So he was on the phone to me,
Hmm.
"Look, I need you to take care of this right now." So that, what you're saying about women having that frequency of seeing a
Yes.
doctor, well, I was doing that at least once a year, and that's how he was able to track it. In fact, I think, I had gone a little longer because of COVID. So in 2022, that's when he saw, "Oh, there's a big change here."
Okay.
So, I was able to move on it at that time. So, that speaks to, are we in regular conversation with our medical people, and then to find someone that you really, really like.
Right.
Excuse
But I
me.
think also, oh, bless you. I think also, though, Frederick, something you just said that we're in conversation. I know I was talking about the communication piece, but also, too, men talking to each other. So that's the other piece is
Mhm,
men. And that's why I'm always, you know, promoting, you know, um, your, organization. And I feel like your platform in this sense,
mhm, mhm,
because one of the things that you're bringing to the forefront, which we see it in pockets, but we need a national movement on this. We do,
mhm,
which is Black men talking to Black men about things that impact Black men.
mhm. Yeah.
And and I'm saying like this podcast is doing that. I know you're doing workshops because to bring awareness to a variety of things related to Black men,
Mhm,
because Black men are not are they are and they are not isolated. Okay. They don't need to be isolated, but I think what happens is a lot of these topics are uncomfortable. So whether we're talking about mortality, whether we're talking about different things related to physical health, mental health, all those kinds of things, these become we they become taboo topics. And I get it. Generationally, folks are not sitting down at the dining room table saying, "Hey, let's talk about your coping strategies, or let's talk about, what's stressing us out this week."
mm,
Nobody's having those conversations. However, now we know it's necessary to have those conversations,
mhm.
and Black men need to be talking about those things because who better to understand than another Black man?
I totally agree. When you said that, I was, I've met, a a brother
Mhm.
who his name is Chris Williams, uh, and he has a, very interesting story around his health, and I won't tell it, but, because you can go to his website. His website is, I think it's called, Heart, Body, and Soul, and,
Mhm.
I think he has an event coming up, uh, next month, yeah, June 6th. a Saturday. It's a day-long event called Black Men's Health Festival, and this is 2006. He goes pretty much most of the day. I've been to one
Mhm.
of them, and that's where I met him. But his story has propelled him to try to have conversation with other Black men, and the day is sort of surrounding all that. So he comes to mind as someone who's actually trying to do that. He's not a healthcare professional, but
Mhm.
because of his own drastic health situation, he kind of became this type of person, an advocate for Black men and Black health. So you want to kind of support him too. That
Yeah,
uh,
I will
body
definitely
and
check it out.
soul
Yeah, Heart,
organization
Body, and
that he
Soul.
started.
Mhm.
But I've been to a few of their events, including the day long event around mental health that he promotes. So we have you're right. There are those pockets of people. I'm not so much on. I'm on the mental health kind of spectrum, but I like to talk to Black men, not so much about their, what's kind of wrong with them, but to suss out, is there a path for them to become more in tune with themselves, more intentional with themselves?
Mhm.
And I use a historical framework to do it. Because I'll reference my family a lot because to me they're part of the historical framework.
Mhm.
They were, as I said before, they were sharecroppers, and when they a bunch of them came to New York, they were part of that red line stuff
Mhm.
that we had to go through. But it's even reminding me now of when we talk about healthcare amongst Blacks. Um, Even in the South, there were no doctors dedicated to the health of Black people. Um, there's a part of my workshop I talk about, even when white doctors wanted to take Black patients, they were already always at the end of the day, and there was a choice. Uh, One of the first Black hospitals, Providence in Chicago. I think that that doctor's name was also Williams. He performed the first open heart surgery when there had never been one. He was just trying to save this guy's life. He did
Mhm.
save the guy's life. The guy lived to be, to be an older person. But even that wasn't reported until 3 years after it happened.
Wow.
And we very rarely hear about Dr. Williams and that hospital in Chicago being the first dedicated Black hospital. Some came after that, many came after that, really. But the collapse of that was the healthcare system we have now, which has when you got rid of a lot of these Black hospitals. They started springing up in the early 1900s. There was Providence, and then there was Dunbar in Detroit. There was Frederick Douglass, I think, in Philadelphia, and they all kind of collapsed as the 70s and 80s came around, and healthcare is what we have now. So it pushed
Right. The business.
the business of it.
The business.
So,
Yes.
on
Yes.
one hand, uh, the people that you talked about, Henrietta and the Tuskegee, all of these things are because Black people didn't have their own healthcare system or didn't have their own doctors, or those doctors and nurses were, kind of, uh, they were produced during a
Mhm.
time after the turn of the century, the turn of the last century, and they were still pretty kind of new. How do where do these Black doctors get trained? And I'm sure that's part of what even goes on now. Um, Whereas, where are the Black doctors that we need in community that could
Right.
be doing this work for us, and they seem sometimes being to be blocked out of it. because all these, hurdles are put in their way,
And how is the system set up? Because I know that, we see less and less doctors, and I'm not sure if that is across the country, but I feel like it probably is. You have less and less doctors in private practice
Mm,
and more doctors that are now under a group,
yes.
like a major business conglomerate
Yeah.
of
Mhm.
healthcare, whether it's like,
Yeah.
I know down this way, South Jersey, it's like a Jefferson, we have Capital Health, we have these
Mhm.
big,
Mhm.
where you could be seeing any doctor under that. But so you don't have the where, when I was a kid, the doctor's office was like,
Mhm.
you went to that office and he
Yeah.
was the doctor,
Yeah.
and that was it. Now you don't. And even my doctor here that I used to go see, she, ended up retired. Well, she kind of retired, and then like Jefferson basically took over. So when I go to the doctor's office, I'm going to Jefferson. It's not
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
go see my doctor such and such. So
Mhm.
and I think, and that's a cross. So that's another thing too. Like you said, it's kind of um these big companies,
Mhm.
that are making their money off of healthcare. And so it really does possibly take away the individualized care. I know they say it doesn't. They try to act like it doesn't, but it's there's such a turnaround, and then sometimes you're seeing an advanced nurse practitioner, which is, fine.
Mhm.
Sometimes I
Yeah.
think they are
Yeah.
more attentive
Yeah.
than the actual medical doctors
I
sometimes.
agree with that. Mhm.
um and have more, information, will give you more information, what have you. And so I think, all those things are factors. And also too, we know there are disparities in
Mhm.
healthcare with amongst marginalized individuals,
Mhm.
Black folks being under that umbrella. And so there is a need, for us to advocate. So a lot of times the partners of Black men are trying to advocate for their partner for whatever, especially if they're in the hospital, anything like that.
Mhm.
um I think it's specifically with older adults, and this is one of the things that I've always had a great concern with. When older adults go in the hospital, for instance, you know a lot of times there's not a lot of communication with them. Now certainly people are saying, hey, I'm coming in, I'm going to do this is the test we're going to do, what have you. But there isn't always this opportunity to ask questions. Excuse me. A
Mhm.
lot of times older adults may not, sometimes they're just feeling, they may be out of it, they may not be as coherent, they may be overwhelmed by being in the hospital. So I think that's no different for Black men. And so a lot of that can cause someone, like, I know, for instance, for my dad in particular, you know he has no desire to ever go back to, I don't think anybody wants to go to hospital, but he would probably avoid going to a hospital at
Mhm.
all costs.
Mhm.
So, because there is this, idea of being in an unfamiliar area, you got people putting their hands on you and everything. And even though there certainly is a group of folks that they're okay with that, that the hospital is almost like, oh, I'm getting attention, but that isn't often with men, and Black men
Mhm.
in particular. They don't want that kind of attention.
Mhm.
Um, so I think, so again, going back to the avoidance, but that avoidance could cost you some time in your life or what have you. Um, and so there is, I think all those are just those are factors, and the communication between, I think, older Black men and family members, because we also think about their wishes.
Mhm.
What do they want? Especially as you get older,
Mhm.
like, what do you want done with your stuff? Where do you want to live? How
Mhm.
do you want to be? What do you want in terms of even thinking about a living will, durable power of attorney, all
Mhm.
those kinds of
Mhm.
things, that about quality of life as you
Yeah.
age.
Yeah.
And, we're just not having those, people are just not having those
Yeah.
conversations.
That's a tough one.
It
Even
is a tough one. It is
when I was
very
going
tough.
through it, even when my father was alive, it was like, okay, it took over 3 to 5 years just to get the both of them in motion around those
Mhm.
types of things. With a real effort by my brother and myself. And when my mother was, I could see the deterioration of her mind, you know,
Mhm.
and I wanted to, but had to kind of manipulate her into getting those things, power of attorney, get her living will, because that would have just been, up in smoke and
Yeah.
no one would know what to do. So
Right.
in having that, and in some ways, we've also heard horror stories where, if you're trying to be a good child to your parent and you're trying to be a good caregiver, there's nothing nefarious going on. But we do have that kind of population who wants
Hmm.
to profit off of the
Right.
elders' care,
Yes.
their lack, cognition. It's almost like,
The
and
number one,
Mhm,
Frederick, the number one abuse for older adults, the
mhm.
number one is financial abuse.
Wow.
It's financial abuse. And here's and I was just, because you'd mentioned I was doing a training this morning related to hoarding. So it was, but in there, and a hoarding related to older adults because it's about 3 times more prevalent amongst older adults. Various reasons for that, but never, was a topic for another day. However, one of the things I was stressing was about the financial piece because it is something for us to kind of assess when we're working with older adults. But oftentimes it's not the way we would think it would be. So it's not that somebody's just going in their account stealing their money. Now, sometimes that's the case, but a
Mhm,
lot of times older adults are giving up the money
mhm,
freely
mhm,
because, oh, my granddaughter or they're spending time with me, or they're coming by to visit me. Oh, they just asked me for this. Let me help them out. Like I have numerous examples of where it's an abusive, manipulative situation,
mhm,
but the older adult is they're not viewing it that way because they're
mhm,
looking at, well, they come to see me, they're coming to visit
mhm,
me.
mhm, mhm,
And there's stories where older men in particular have gotten all their money taken away by some nefarious person, you know
mhm,
what I mean, who came into their
mhm,
lives and acted as though they wanted a relationship, all those
mhm,
kind of stuff,
mhm, mhm,
and because they were given attention to the person has basically signed over everything to them. And sometimes it's not a family member. Oftentimes it is, but a lot
mhm,
of times it's not a family member, and the family doesn't even know. When they find out is when the person is losing their home, they've signed
mhm,
their house over. So this is, older adults are susceptible to this kind of stuff. They're susceptible to the scams and that. And certainly there's a lot of information out there about that, but there's also new scams. You
mhm,
know what I mean? Like we're all, you get a text message about, oh, you got a ticket somewhere. Now we may know, okay, that didn't happen. You know what I mean?
mhm,
This
mhm,
is crazy. But for an older adult, when they get an email, when they get, a text message or whatever, oh, maybe I did get a ticket, or maybe I
mhm,
did. Let me click this, let me call or whatever. Next thing you know, they've given up some information.
and they're
So
trying to be
yeah,
responsible in many ways.
right,
It's that kind
right.
of generational thing of, well, this is authoritative, and so it sounds that
Yes.
way, it feels
Yeah.
that way, so I must
Yes.
respond to it as opposed to, yeah, the Social Security is not gonna text you. They might send you an
No,
email, but they're not gonna
no,
text you,
no.
you know?
And let me
So
just say, there's a special place in hell
mhm,
for folks who take advantage of old people because honestly, eh, for most the average older person, like even if they would help anyway. They would help. They would
mhm,
give some help to a family member. If they have it, they would probably give you their last, that type of thing. But it is, yeah, there a lot of times there is, and older men are just as susceptible. You know what I
mhm.
mean? It's not
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah,
that it's only women. Older men
mhm,
are just as susceptible
yeah,
to the scams of giving the money, of paying for things.
mhm,
Um, or giving somebody access to their ATM card or something
mhm,
like that and their PIN
yeah,
and not checking their account, all that type of thing.
yeah,
And I think if we are managing the finances, like I, assist my dad with managing his finances, but I'm like, hey, dad, this is your statement. How do you want me to pay this? What's
mhm,
going on?
mhm,
It is about the communication. It's about making sure they're part of that decision making process
yeah,
because it is an honor for somebody to trust you enough to
yes,
say, hey,
mhm,
handle this for me. You know
mhm,
what I mean? That says a lot about what they think of you,
mhm,
but we don't want to misuse that,
yeah,
breach
yeah,
that trust.
great,
And there
totally
you're
agree,
right. There's so many people
mhm,
who Yeah, you hear about it all the time.
all
And
the
the
time.
stuff the and what happens is it'll be now this person is no longer here and it's time to bury the person and this person was in charge of their finances and they saying I ain't got no money.
Mhm. Yep.
So it's like, well, wait a minute. What this person was getting 2 pensions
Right.
and Social Security. Like,
Mhm.
what happened to the money?
Yeah.
Right. But then they get it. Then this person is now, then there's a, and that's the other piece too. And that's why I think it's so important for that pre-planning.
Yes. Yes.
Because if
I was
not,
gonna mention that.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Because if you got
One of the first
multiple
things we
family
had to
members,
do, we had to do a pre-plan for my mother,
hmm
and but that's also a barrier. If you feel, all right, let's say, I'm 75 years old, I'm still in good, I can take care of myself. I want to
right.
continue to do that.
Yeah, you're
And
not going, you don't want to have
someone,
that conversation.
yeah, someone's like saying, well, I want power of attorney. I want, we're trying to make this plan for you. It's like, what kind of plan you trying to make for me?
Right.
You
It's
know,
yeah, exactly.
it sounds
Exactly.
kind of,
Yeah.
it's the oddest conversation because it's the first time you're ever going to have it. It's the first and only
Yes.
time you're ever going to have it because we're talking about you. We're talking about you not being here,
Yeah.
or at least
Yeah.
cognitively in one way not being here, and then not really being here. What happens
Right.
to
Right.
everything that you've accumulated, or I'm still kind of going through my mother's stuff trying to figure out. Well, I stopped really because the impetus of that was my brother. But now that my brother has also passed away, it's like, well, what am I saving this stuff for? It
Mhm.
only means something to that person. It doesn't have
Right.
the same meaning to me. There are parts of it that, yeah, they mean something to me. But even in my own youth, I'm thinking, who am I leaving all this stuff to? It's been
Yeah.
left to me. Who am I
Right.
leaving it to? Do I want my children to have to go through all this stuff that they have no attachment to? So
Right.
these are
Right.
challenging conversations as we begin to age. So before we go, what kind of give me three things that um, you know I don't want to exclude women, but because they live longer. Black men don't have it as they're gonna have a shorter life, so they need more help. But what are the
Okay.
three what are the three things or so that you might watch out for? Say the man is 70 on between 70 and 80. What and good health and good, you know, uh, cognitive ability. What would you say uh, are the two or three things they might want to watch out for?
So, like in terms of, you mean tips for them? Like what do they need to do? So I,
I heard myself ask the question, and at the end of
because
it,
you
I said,
said,
which way could that go? Because that could go health
because watch
wise,
out for, yeah. I
you know.
mean, well, so the thing is, these things kind of sneak up on you. So a person can go, and I know I talk about this all the time, how quickly someone can go from being independent, high functioning, very more cognitively clear,
Mhm.
and so whether it could be a health event, it could be, now all of a sudden you're not, remembering stuff and just start slowing down. You know what I mean? Like you just as we age. So I think the issue is we have to be proactive as much as we possibly can. And you probably shouldn't wait till you're in your 70s, but you probably should be sometime around the 50s and 60s. I need to take my own advice because we need to start thinking about, because here's the thing, you're not planning for your death. I mean, I think that's where people get stuck. It's like,
Mhm.
well, if I start talking about this and I do this, then I'm planning for my death. So then they think that's negative and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But the reality is we're all going to die at some point.
Mhm.
What you're really doing is you're making sure that your wishes, not just about death, but about how you want to age, are
Mhm.
adhered to. So what I would say is even if you just start jotting down information, like especially if you own things,
Mhm.
you need to think about what do I want to happen to those things, and so maybe you just start thinking about it. People definitely need a will, especially if you own stuff, as early as possible. But as you start to get into your 60s and 70s, you know, you need to make sure that those doctor's appointments, those doctor's visits are part of your life cycle.
Mhm.
Okay. You know, that you're going there, you're doing that, you have a relationship with with medical professionals, you're getting your blood work done. That's something you can do so that you know what's going on with you. So
Mhm.
that can certainly help you to make some informed decisions
Mhm.
about life. Because hey, you could easily live on to 100 plus years old without a doubt, especially if that's a thing in your family. People
Yeah.
have lived a long time.
Mhm.
Likelihood is you'll live that long too.
Mhm.
But you also need to make sure that you're not leaving your family members, whether it's your children, all that, to kind of, you know, run around like a chicken with their head cut off, trying to
Mhm.
figure out, well, where's the paperwork? So
Mhm.
that's another thing, making sure what your paperwork, your documents are all in one location,
Mhm.
a fireproof safe, whatever that
Mhm.
needs to look like, or in a safe deposit box at a bank somewhere, but
Mhm.
that somebody knows, a trusted person knows where the key is, what the information is, because that's another piece. People die and everybody's trying to figure out where the information is. The
Right.
good thing is now with our cell phones, we can put on there, I think it's like a death person or something.
Mhm.
You can establish that person on your phone. You can
Mhm.
do all that, but you can also just put the information in your phone so that if someone asks, they can see this is where stuff is. But I think like with somebody in their 70s and I would say 80s, you need to make sure everybody knows where everything is.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And if you do not have the living will, the power of attorney, all that stuff, because it's a lot harder when you're not cognitively
Mhm.
clear to be able to get that stuff done.
Yeah.
Because now, especially if you have multiple family members, if you have more than one child, if you have a spouse, because what people don't get, and I think if we don't get anything else, if people don't get anything else from today with this conversation, you know your kids, you know your family. And so let's not think that when you pass or you're sick or you're laying in that hospital bed, that everybody's gonna come together
Mhm.
and just kumbaya and let's do
Mhm.
what's best for daddy or
Mhm.
let's do what's best for uncle. No, they are not. They're gonna be
Mhm.
fighting and arguing right over you.
Mhm.
If you have stuff written down, you don't have to deal with all that. You won't hear that, and they don't have to deal with that. You've written down your wishes, you've gotten it notarized, whatever you need to do, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Okay. And it saves a lot of stress and issues with folks because when you don't do that, your family is now fighting over
Mhm.
some scraps.
So the
Okay.
and they're using their own interpretation, and
Right.
each interpretation is slightly different.
Exactly. Oh, daddy loved me the most. So I know he would want me to have the house. You
Uh-huh.
know what I mean? Yeah. So and a lot of times you got to think, even if they have a spouse,
Mhm.
the spouse is just as old as they are. So a
Yeah.
spouse is not necessarily going to, and granted, I don't want to put age because it's also about their functioning. But
Mhm.
if they're functioning fine, that's fine. They can be the power of attorney. But a lot of times you want somebody that, you know, is the
Slightly younger.
assumption is
Right.
they're going to be, yes, slightly younger. And
Mhm.
so they can handle that, but also making sure they know your wishes.
Mhm.
And for those of us who are the children of older adults, it's not an easy conversation to have,
Mhm.
but we do need to ask the questions.
Yeah.
You know, look, hey, what do you want? How do you want this to be? You know, if when you pass, what do you want us to do about funeral arrangements, all that kind of stuff? Like
Mhm.
that is stuff to ask the question. I know it's not comfortable for us because a lot of times we're in denial about what's going
Mhm.
on, but it's better to know than when this person has passed or as they've gotten old, they can't tell you anymore now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because their cognitive ability has diminished. And now you're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
It can be a very stressful time, and that's not a time to be stressed out about planning when
Mhm.
you are also grieving.
I agree. I'm just gonna add one thing to that in the front of that. Uh, we need to physically take care of ourselves.
Oh,
That
yes.
that should
Yes.
not, walk, lift weights, run, do something.
Yes.
Anyway,
Dance, do whatever you need to do. Move.
move.
That's it. We got to move.
Dr. Robin, I love you, my dear, and
Love
I'm
you too.
so glad you could do this for me. I guess you're still on deck to come back because there's still so
Oh,
much to
yeah.
talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Anytime.
thanks for coming.
Thank you.
thank you for listening. And remember, whether you're navigating struggle or stepping into the unknown, you're not alone. This is for men. This is about men. This has been On Being Black Men, a blueprint for power and purpose with Fredrick Bush. You can find On Being Black Men on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and at icbmale.com. That's icbmale.com.
If you or someone you love is in emotional pain, help is just 3 digits away. Call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's free, confidential, and available 24/7. That's 988. Stay safe, stay grounded, and keep building.